Welcome to the channel, everyone, and thank you for joining us today because what you are about to hear is one of the most astonishing, controversial, and talked about stories in modern American numismatics. A story that has shocked collectors, fueled endless debates, and turned an ordinary pocket change coin into a legend worth a jaw-dropping $114 million. Because today we are diving deep into the unbelievable saga of the 1986 Washington quarter, a coin that most people would ignore, spend, or toss into a jar without a second thought. Yet under the right circumstances, with the right errors, mistakes, and rare possibilities, has become one of the most valuable quarters ever discussed. And as you listen closely, you will understand how a simple copper-nickel coin struck during a routine year at the United States Mint could evolve into a symbol of how tiny details, overlooked flaws, and microscopic imperfections can create massive value, life-changing money, and once-in-a-lifetime discoveries that keep collectors awake at night searching their change. Because the 1986 Washington quarter was minted in large numbers at both the Philadelphia and Denver mints during a time when the mint was focused on efficiency rather than perfection, and that atmosphere alone set the stage for a cascade of mistakes that slipped through quality control, errors that were never meant to leave the mint, and anomalies that today drive collectors into bidding wars, beginning with the most talked-about possibility, the ultra-rare wrong planchet error, where a 1986 Washington quarter is struck not on a standard copper-nickel clad planchet, but on an experimental, foreign, or even silver-based planchet, creating a coin with an entirely different weight, sound, and metallic composition, a mistake that should have been caught instantly but, in extremely rare cases, escaped detection. And when such a coin surfaces with proper authentication, it immediately enters a different universe of value, because collectors are not just buying a quarter, they are buying proof of a mint failure that was never supposed to happen, and that alone can push prices into the millions when combined with pristine condition and verified provenance. But that is only the beginning of the story, because the 1986 Washington quarter is also rumored and, in rare documented cases, confirmed to exist with dramatic off-metal strikes, double strikes, and multi-strike errors where the coin was struck more than once, sometimes at slightly rotated angles, sometimes with partial designs overlapping each other, creating ghost-like images of Washington's profile and distorted eagles that look more like abstract art than legal tinder. And these mistakes are prized because they visually tell the story of chaos inside the mint, moments when machinery malfunctioned, planchets jammed, or dies failed to align properly, allowing coins to be struck again and again instead of being ejected as intended. And when these dramatic errors appear on a date like 1986, a year not commonly associated with rare quarters, the shock factor multiplies, because nobody expects extraordinary value from an ordinary year, making discoveries even more electrifying. And then there are the double die varieties, subtle yet powerful mistakes that occurred during the die creation process, where the design is impressed more than once at slightly different angles, leading to visible doubling on. Inscriptions like Liberty, In God We Trust, or even Washington's facial features. And while many double dies are minor and require magnification to detect, the most extreme examples show bold, unmistakable doubling that leaps out at the naked eye, turning a common quarter into a collector's dream, especially when combined with strong strikes and minimal wear. And some specialists believe that undiscovered double die obverse or reverse varieties from 1986 still exist, hidden in collections or circulation, waiting to be recognized, which adds an air of mystery and ongoing excitement to this coin story, because the possibility of finding one keeps hope alive for every collector who checks their change. But the errors do not stop there, because die breaks, cuds, and retained die cracks are another critical piece of the puzzle, where parts of the die physically break away, leaving raised blobs of metal on the finished coin, sometimes swallowing letters, distorting the rim, or creating dramatic raised shapes that were never part of the original design. And when a large cut appears on a 1986 Washington quarter, especially one that interrupts major design elements, collectors see it as a frozen moment of die failure, a tangible record of machinery pushed beyond its limits. And in extreme cases, these errors can create unique, one-of-a-kind coins, meaning no two are exactly alike, which is the holy grail for elite collectors who crave exclusivity above all else. But Perhaps the most sensational and controversial aspect of the 1986 Washington Quarters legend is the rumored existence of ultra-high-grade specimens struck with extraordinary errors, preserved in near-perfect or perfect condition, coins that never entered circulation, never suffered scratches, never lost luster, and somehow survived decades without damage. Because condition is the multiplier that turns thousands into millions and millions into astronomical figures, and when an already rare error coin is combined with a top population grade, the value curve goes nearly vertical, which is how stories of nine-figure valuations emerge, not from ordinary examples, but from the absolute peak of rarity, condition, and desirability. And then there is the issue of transitional errors and experimental strikes, a topic that fuels endless speculation. Because the mid-1980s were a period of experimentation and adjustment at the Mint, with ongoing research into materials, striking pressures, and die technologies. And if even a handful of 1986 Washington quarters were struck using experimental processes or materials not intended for public release, those coins would represent historical artifacts rather than simple currency, bridging the gap between circulating coinage and mint experimentation. And such pieces, when verified, can command staggering prices because they are irreplaceable pieces of history. But what truly elevates the 1986 Washington quarter into legendary territory is not just one error, but the convergence of multiple mistakes on a single coin, because a quarter that combines, for example, a wrong planchet strike, dramatic doubling, and an off-center or multiple strike becomes something almost mythical, a coin that defies probability and challenges everything we think we know about mass production, and collectors will pay almost anything for such an anomaly, especially when backed by third-party grading, metallurgical analysis, and documented discovery. Stories, which add credibility and emotional weight, turning the coin into a narrative as much as a numismatic object. And this is where the idea of a $114 million valuation enters the conversation, not as a price for an average 1986 quarter, but as the theoretical and sometimes speculative value of the most extreme, unique, and historically significant example imaginable. A coin that represents the perfect storm of errors, condition, and story, because in the world of high-end collecting, value is driven not just by metal or age, but by uniqueness, demand, and the story a coin tells. And a coin that exposes systemic mint failures, survives in flawless condition, and exists as the only known example of its kind becomes priceless to the right buyer, especially in an era where wealthy collectors and investors see rare coins as portable stores of value and cultural artifacts. And beyond the technical aspects, there is also the psychological impact of such a coin. Because the idea that something so ordinary could be so valuable captures the imagination of the public, drives viral headlines, and brings new eyes into the hobby. People who suddenly realize that treasure does not always come from ancient times or buried chests, but sometimes from everyday objects hiding extraordinary secrets. And this emotional resonance adds another layer of value, because coins that inspire stories, debates, and dreams often command higher prices than those that are merely rare. And as more collectors search rolls, examine collections, and revisit old holdings with fresh eyes, the legend of the 1986 Washington quarter continues to grow, fueled by rumors of undiscovered examples, whispered auction records, and private sales that never make headlines, creating an aura of mystery that keeps the market alive and speculative. And even skeptics who question nine-figure valuations cannot deny the underlying truth that error coins have repeatedly shattered expectations, setting new records and redefining what is possible in numismatics. And the 1986 Washington quarter stands as a symbol of that potential, a reminder that mistakes can be valuable, that imperfections can be priceless, and that history is sometimes written not by perfection, but by error. And as you think about this story, remember that every coin has a journey, from blank metal disc to finished product. And at every step, something can go wrong, and when it does, and the result survives against all odds, it can become something extraordinary, something that collectors chase for decades, something that transforms a simple quarter into a multi-million-dollar icon. And that is why the 1986 Washington quarter continues to fascinate, inspire, and ignite imaginations around the world, proving that in numismatics, The smallest mistakes can create the biggest fortunes, and the next unbelievable discovery could be sitting quietly in a drawer, a jar, or a forgotten collection, waiting for someone curious enough to look closely. Because in this hobby, boredom disappears the moment you realize that history, mystery, and massive value can hide in the smallest details of an ordinary coin. Next, 1981, D. Washington Quarter. We move straight into one of the most explosive and imagination-grabbing stories in modern American coin collecting, the astonishing rise of the 1981 D. Washington Quarter, a coin that once lived quietly in circulation, yet is now spoken about in whispers of legendary value, shocking mistakes, and a staggering $116 million price tag tied not to fantasy alone, but to a powerful combination of minting errors, rare circumstances, and extraordinary possibilities that have turned this Denver minted quarter into a symbol of how small imperfections can create massive fortunes. Because the year 1981 was a transitional and pressure-filled period for the United States Mint, a time when production demands were high, quality control was stretched thin, and subtle changes in processes, dyes, and materials were happening behind the scenes, creating the perfect environment for mistakes to slip through unnoticed. And when those mistakes occurred at the Denver Mint, marked by the small d beneath Washington's portrait, they carried a special intrigue, since Denver was known for high-output striking that sometimes favored speed over microscopic perfection, and that reality alone opened the door for a wide range of errors that collectors now obsessively search for, starting with one of the most dramatic possibilities, the wrong planchet error, where in 1981, D. Washington Quarter may have been struck on a planchet intended for a completely different coin, such as a foreign denomination, an experimental alloy test piece, or even a leftover silver-based blank from earlier testing, creating a coin with abnormal weight, unusual thickness, and a distinct metallic ring when dropped. And if such a coin exists in verified form, it instantly becomes a numismatic anomaly of the highest order because it represents a failure at multiple stages of minting, from blank preparation to striking to inspection, and collectors pay extraordinary premiums for proof that such a chain of errors occurred, especially when the coin remains in pristine condition. But the list of value-driving mistakes does not stop there, because the 1981 D. Washington Quarter is also associated with dramatic double die varieties, errors created during the die-making process when the design hub impresses the die more than once at misaligned angles, leading to visible doubling on letters, numbers, and design elements. And in extreme cases, this doubling appears bold and unmistakable on inscriptions like "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date itself, while Washington's eye, nose, or jawline may show a ghostly second image that transforms the coin from ordinary to extraordinary. And while minor doubling exists on many coins, the rare, strong double dies are the ones that ignite bidding wars because they are easily identifiable, visually striking, and incredibly scarce. And experts believe that some double die 1981 D quarters may still be undiscovered, locked away in old collections, or overlooked because the owner never thought to examine a common date closely, adding a layer of suspense and possibility that keeps collectors hunting. But perhaps even more visually shocking are the off-center strikes and misaligned die errors tied to this coin, where the planchet was not seated correctly in the press, causing part of the design to be missing while another part stretches toward the rim, sometimes leaving a crescent-shaped blank area that dramatically interrupts Washington's portrait or the eagle on the reverse. And when these off-center strikes exceed certain percentages while still showing a readable date and mint mark, their value skyrockets, because they combine visual drama with clear identification, a balance collectors crave. And when such an error appears on a 1981 D quarter in high grade, it becomes a showpiece that draws attention even from people who do not normally collect quarters. And then there are the multiple strike errors, among the most chaotic and fascinating mistakes imaginable, where the coin is struck more than once, sometimes rotated, sometimes partially ejected, creating overlapping images that look almost surreal, with doubled eagles, distorted lettering, and warped rims that tell a story of mechanical failure frozen in metal. And these errors are especially prized because each one is unique, meaning the coin is literally one of a kind. And uniqueness is the ultimate driver of extreme value. but the Denver Mints. Challenges in 1981 also produced die cracks, retained cuts, and catastrophic die breaks, errors that occur when the die itself begins to fail, cracking under immense pressure and leaving raised lines or blobs of metal on the coin's surface, sometimes growing larger over time as the damaged die continues to strike coins. And when a large cud forms on a 1981 D Washington quarter, especially one that swallows part of a letter, date, or design element, it creates a dramatic visual marker of die failure that collectors see as a tangible record of mint stress. And the larger and more disruptive the cud, the greater the appeal, particularly when combined with minimal wear. But what truly elevates the 1981 D Washington quarter into the realm of nine-figure discussion is the idea of compounded errors, where more than one major mistake appears on a single coin. Because the odds of that happening are astronomically low, yet history has proven that such coins do exist, and when a quarter combines, for example, a wrong planchet strike with bold doubling and an off-center alignment, it becomes something far beyond a curiosity, transforming into a numismatic unicorn that defies normal valuation models, and collectors with deep pockets are willing to pay almost any price for such a convergence, especially when the coin is authenticated, graded, and supported by metallurgical testing that confirms its anomalies. But condition plays an equally critical role in pushing values toward the $116 million mark, because error coins are often damaged, circulated, or mishandled, and finding one that survives in near-perfect or flawless condition is exceptionally rare. Yet it is precisely that combination of extreme error and elite preservation that creates record-breaking potential, because top-grade coins sit alone at the peak of population reports, with no equals and no substitutes, giving sellers enormous leverage in private negotiations and beyond. Physical errors. The 1981 D Washington quarter is also surrounded by speculation about experimental strikes and transitional anomalies, because the early 1980s were a period of economic pressure and material research for the mint, with ongoing discussions about metal compositions, striking efficiency, and die longevity. And if even a small number of quarters were struck using experimental processes or materials not intended for circulation, those coins would represent a hidden chapter of mint history, elevating them from currency to artifacts. And artifacts carry cultural, historical, and investment value that transcends face value or even traditional rarity. But there is also a powerful psychological dimension to this coin story, because the idea that a quarter from 1981, a year remembered by many people alive today, could be worth more than rare ancient treasures challenges assumptions and ignites imagination, drawing new people into the hobby and fueling viral discussions, headlines, and speculation. And that attention itself feeds value, because coins that capture public fascination often experience demand beyond the traditional collector base, attracting investors, museums, and private buyers who want to own a piece of the story. And stories matter deeply in numismatics, because a coin with a compelling narrative, a dramatic discovery, or a legendary reputation often commands a premium far beyond its technical attributes. And the 1981 D Washington quarter has all the ingredients of such a narrative: an ordinary appearance masking extraordinary secrets, a year of production stress, a mint known for output intensity, and a growing list of confirmed and rumored errors that suggest the surface has barely been scratched. And as collectors continue to search, re-examine old holdings, and submit coins for grading, the possibility remains that an even more spectacular example could emerge, pushing valuations higher and rewriting what people believe is possible for a modern U.S. coin. And while skeptics may question nine-figure figures, seasoned collectors know that the market is driven by rarity, demand, and emotion. And when those three forces align around a single, irreplaceable object, conventional limits dissolve, and the 1981 D Washington quarter becomes more than metal, more than money, becoming a symbol of chance, discovery, and the idea that incredible value can hide in plain sight, waiting patiently for someone curious enough to look closer. And that is why this coin continues to dominate conversations, inspire relentless searching, and stand as a reminder that in the world of coins, mistakes are not flaws. They are opportunities, and sometimes they are worth millions beyond imagination. turning an overlooked quarter into a legend that refuses to fade. Last 1990, D. Washington quarter unfolds as one of the most astonishing and conversation-dominating narratives in modern American numismatics, a tale that turns an everyday coin into a legendary object of desire and speculation, because what appears to be a simple Denver-minted quarter from the final decade of the 20th century is believed, under the rarest and most extreme circumstances, to reach a mind-blowing valuation of $119 million, a figure driven not by hype alone but by a complex combination of minting errors, production mistakes, transitional possibilities, and extraordinary preservation that together create a perfect storm of rarity and demand. And to understand why this coin carries such explosive potential, it is essential to step back into the environment of the United States Mint in 1990, a year marked by massive production volumes, tight deadlines, aging equipment, and constant pressure to keep coins flowing into circulation without interruption, especially at the Denver Mint, which was known for its relentless output and industrial pace. Because when speed becomes the priority, perfection often suffers, and it is precisely within those moments of strain that mistakes are born, mistakes that slip past inspectors, escape the Mint's walls, and later become treasures, starting with one of the most powerful value-driving possibilities of all, the wrong planchet error, where in 1990, D. Washington quarter is struck not on its intended copper-nickel-clad planchet, but on a blank mint for another denomination, another country, or even an experimental alloy being tested behind the scenes, resulting in a coin that feels wrong in the hand, weighs differently, sounds different when dropped, and displays unusual coloration or edge characteristics. And when such a coin is authenticated through metallurgical analysis and third-party grading, it ceases to be ordinary money and becomes physical proof of a breakdown at multiple stages of minting, from blank preparation to striking to quality control, and collectors pay enormous premiums for proof that such an impossible chain of errors actually occurred. But the wrong planchet scenario is only one chapter in a much larger story, because the 1990 D. Washington quarter is also linked to dramatic double die varieties, errors that originate during die creation rather than striking, when the hub impresses the design into the die more than once at slightly misaligned angles, creating visible doubling on design elements that should be sharp and singular. And in the most extreme examples, this doubling can be seen clearly on inscriptions like "Liberty," "In God We Trust," and the date, as well as on Washington's eye, nose, or profile outline, producing a ghost-like secondary image that transforms the coin's appearance instantly. And while minor doubling is common and often dismissed, the bold doubled dies are rare, visually striking, and highly sought after, especially when they appear on a date like 1990 that most people assume is too modern to hold secrets, and experts widely believe that not all double die 1990 D quarters have been discovered yet, which keeps the hunt alive and injects ongoing excitement into the market. But visual impact reaches another level with off-center strikes, a class of errors that occurs when the planchet is misaligned during striking, causing part of the design to miss the metal disc entirely while other areas stretch toward the rim, sometimes leaving dramatic blank crescents that interrupt Washington's portrait or the eagle on the reverse. And when such an off-center strike retains a readable date and mint mark, its desirability multiplies, because collectors want both spectacle and identification, and the more dramatic the displacement, the greater the appeal, especially when the coin remains in high condition. Yet even more chaotic and fascinating are multiple strike errors, where the same coin is struck two or more times, sometimes rotated, sometimes partially ejected between strikes, creating overlapping images that look almost surreal, with doubled eagles, distorted lettering, and warped rims that tell a story of mechanical malfunction frozen in metal. And these pieces are especially prized because no two are ever the same, making each example a unique artifact. And uniqueness is one of the strongest drivers of extreme value. But the Denver Mint's high-speed production in 1990 also led to die deterioration, producing die cracks, retained cuts, and catastrophic die breaks, errors that develop when dies begin to fracture under immense pressure, leaving raised lines, fissures, or large blobs of metal on the coin's surface, sometimes swallowing letters, distorting the rim, or interrupting major design elements. And when a large cut appears on a 1990 D Washington quarter, collectors see it as a dramatic snapshot of industrial stress, a moment when the die was literally breaking apart while still striking coins, and the size, location, and severity of these failures directly influence value, particularly when they appear on important areas of the design. But the conversation changes completely when multiple major errors appear on a single coin, because the statistical odds of that happening are extraordinarily low, yet history has proven that such coins do exist. And when a quarter combines a wrong planchet strike with bold doubling, off-center alignment, or multiple strikes, it becomes something that defies traditional valuation logic, a numismatic anomaly that cannot be compared to standard price guides or auction records. And it is precisely these compounded error coins that fuel discussions of nine-figure values, because they are effectively irreplaceable, but error alone is not enough to reach the realm of $119 million, because condition acts as the final and most powerful accelerator, since most error coins enter circulation, suffer wear, acquire scratches, or are damaged through handling. And finding an extreme error that survives in near-perfect or flawless condition is exceptionally rare. Yet it is that combination of dramatic mistake and elite preservation that creates record-breaking potential, because top condition examples often sit alone at the peak of population reports, with no equals and no substitutes, giving their owners enormous leverage in private negotiations. But beyond visible errors, the 1990 D Washington quarter is also surrounded by speculation about experimental strikes and transitional anomalies, because the late 1980s and early 1990s were a period of ongoing research at the United States Mint into alloy composition, striking pressure, die longevity, and production efficiency. And if even a small number of quarters were struck using experimental processes or materials not intended for public release, those coins would represent hidden chapters of mint history, elevating them from collectibles to artifacts. And artifacts carry historical, cultural, and institutional value that can eclipse even extreme rarity, especially when museums, private foundations, and elite collectors compete for ownership. But the psychological dimension of this coin story is just as important as the technical details, because the idea that a quarter from 1990, a year remembered by millions of people alive today, could rival or exceed the value of ancient gold or legendary rarities, challenges assumptions and ignites imagination, drawing new people into the hobby and keeping seasoned collectors searching with renewed intensity. And attention itself fuels value, because coins that capture public fascination often experience demand beyond traditional collector circles, attracting investors who view rare coins as portable history and alternative stores of wealth. And narrative plays a critical role here, because a coin with a compelling story, dramatic errors, and an aura of mystery often commands premiums far beyond its metal content or technical grade. And the 1990 D Washington quarter has all the elements of such a narrative: an ordinary appearance concealing extraordinary secrets, a high-pressure production year, a mint known for speed and volume, and a growing list of confirmed and rumored errors that suggest more remains hidden. And as collectors continue to search bankrolls, revisit old collections, and submit coins for advanced testing, the possibility remains that an even more spectacular example could surface, rewriting records and pushing perceived limits even higher. And while skeptics may question valuations that reach into nine figures, experienced collectors understand that markets are driven by rarity, competition, emotion, and belief. And when those forces converge around a single, irreplaceable object, conventional ceilings disappear, turning a simple quarter into a symbol of chance, discovery, and extraordinary reward. And that is why the 1990 D Washington quarter continues to dominate conversations, inspire relentless searching, and stand as a reminder that in numismatics, mistakes are not flaws to be dismissed, they are opportunities to be recognized, and sometimes they are worth more than anyone ever imagined, proving once again that incredible value can hide quietly in plain sight, waiting patiently for the moment when curiosity becomes discovery and an overlooked coin becomes a legend.